May I first ask each one of you to pick up, if you can, one of those cashew nuts kept on your table and enjoy it. While you're munching it, please understand that you are part of the 1% of the richest, most privileged people in India. Very, very few people have ever eaten a cashew nut in their lives in this country. There would be a few millions in India who have not had breakfast. I stand here exactly 220 years after the famous economist Thomas Malthus propounded his theory, which he published as the classical theory of population, in which he scared the whole world in 1798, saying, food production is going to grow in arithmetic proportion, meaning 2 tons this year, 3 tons next year, 4 tons the year after that. But population is going to grow in geometric progression, meaning 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. And he predicted that in 100 years, humanity would starve to death. But we are here 220 years later and munching cashew nuts. Of course, we should give it to him, be lenient to him, because he could not have foreseen the technological changes over the next 2 centuries, where we would have things from GM foods to fertigation and all kinds of farm technology. I also stand here before you exactly 75 years after the Great Famine of 1943, when 2 million people perished in Bengal. Bengal in the British India, 4 years before independence, had a population of 60 million. 2 million of them died in 1 year because there was a famine. Some people would like to blame Winston Churchill for poor management, but it was also a fact that those many people died because India's agriculture from those days has been very marginal. People were actually more peasants than farmers. And so it was a tragedy waiting to happen. Hundreds of thousands of college students, like many of you in this room, pass from college around the world, not just in India, still believing that poverty has a lot to do with shortage of food. But the reality is quite different. Let me just invite your attention to 3 or 4 crops and their production, and you'll know what a bizarre situation we are in. India's rice production has been about 85 to 90 million tons right until about 2010. And then there was a spurt. Better technologies, probably even better subsidies played a part. Better irrigation infrastructure, better crop varieties, subsidies, everything together. Rice production suddenly jumped to 100 million tons, and we've stayed above that level ever since. And this year we may touch a production of as high as 130 million tons. And our demand has been flat at about 90. So we have so much rice in this country, we cannot sell it anywhere. We cannot sell it anywhere. We're trying to export it to Bangladesh because Bangladesh had a storm last year and they lost their rice crop. But we can do that for a year. After that, they'll recover. We're trying to export it to poorer countries. Only yesterday, the Nigerian information minister said, we will not be importing any rice from any country because we're self-sufficient in 2019. So this is the last year that we'll be importing rice. If you look at wheat, we have a similar problem of surplus. We used to produce about 74 million tons every year. In 2012, that suddenly jumped to 95 million. And today we are close to 100 million tons. And our consumption is also about 100 million tons, which means we are break even there. If you produce more wheat, you'll be in trouble. If you thought rice and wheat are our surplus problems, just consider sugarcane. It is such a gigantic problem for this country. We produce so much sugarcane, nobody wants it. Nobody wants it. This year, our sugarcane production is going to jump 49% and touch 31 million tons. The government of India is faced with this huge problem that they have removed all export curbs. Anybody can export sugarcane. and sugar. And they have instructed mills to necessarily export 2 million tons of sugar. But where do we export that? Nobody wants it. Today, sugar mills in India owe 17,000 crore rupees to farmers. That's 170 billion rupees. If we consider our 31 million tons of sugar as big, just consider Brazil. That country produces, that's the largest producer of sugar in the world, 585 million tons. And they're trying to sell it everywhere. Again, very few people want it. But Brazil always used to switch between, from the sugarcane farmers, they would procure that. Some of that they would convert into sugar for consumption, and the rest they would convert into ethanol to use as automobile fuel. Unfortunately, petroleum prices have dipped, and so ethanol is not as attractive as it used to be. So now Brazil is 50-50 on sugar and ethanol. India is planning to get into ethanol, but perhaps it may do a little bit better in India because our petroleum prices are still kept up by the government artificially. But there's not much we can do with sugar. There's a sugar mountain that India is dealing with. And you all know that sugar is also the biggest killer on earth. And it kills more people every year around the world than Al-Qaeda, Taliban, ISIS, Boko Haram, and all the fringe terrorist groups put together. Diabetes. India is the world's diabetes capital, and Kerala is India's diabetes capital. So, when we won freedom in 1947, we were only 4 years away from that great Bengal famine of 1943. So, we can forgive our leaders for emphasizing so much on food production. In those years, in 1947, we had 330 million people to feed. We were short of food. So, we put all our emphasis on agriculture. 70 years later, we're still doing that. Unfortunately, the times have changed. There is a food glut. There is a food glut in this country. We don't know what to do with our rice. We don't know what to do with our wheat. We don't know what to do with our sugarcane. We don't know what to do with many other things. And so much production, despite climate change, the water table dropping, fertility of soil declining, farmers being in debt crisis. Despite all that, if this is the mountain of food that we are growing, there is a tragedy awaiting us around the corner. And that tragedy, unfortunately, is that we continue to have 55% of our population, and we are the second largest populated country, 55% are still in agriculture. You will understand how shocking this is if you compare the numbers of some other countries, because every country starts as an agrarian society and then moves on to industry and then graduates to services sector. In 1900, 60% of all Americans were in farming. After 100 years, in 2000, there were only 2% in farming, and those 2% were producing enough for actually the whole world. They were restraining their production so that prices would not fall further. In India, we are 70 years down the line, we still have 55% in agriculture. If you consider the real number of people, 55% of 1.3 billion, which is our population, that is 715 million people. They need to go out, they need to move out. But who will break this heartbreaking news to them? Political leaders are not going to do that because they're a huge vote bank. It is heartbreaking anyway to tell anybody that you've lost your profession. This profession doesn't exist. It's just like when a bridge comes across a river, the boatman who was working there would definitely be losing his job. You can't go and pacify him saying, you improve your boat, you give better services, why don't you serve coffee on the way? Nothing will save him. That profession is gone forever. Even 15 years ago, when we drove on India's roads, we could see people painting boats. Hoardings were hand-painted by people. There would have been hundreds and thousands of people doing that across all streets. But today, the flex boats have come. All of them have been wiped out. Most industries, the old world industries, have been wiped out or at least disrupted drastically. In India, we do not like to touch some areas where we are so emotionally attached that even a mention of them would cause friction. For example, we respect our soldiers so much, we respect our farmers so much. I believe that both jobs are in peril. We're not going to have soldiers in any country for long. Most of you sitting in this hall are from an engineering background, and you would understand that human soldiers are not going to fight battles for very long. The same applies for farmers. 2% of a nation's population can produce enough food for a whole society, a whole nation, even for the whole world. We cannot have 55% people working. I'll just give you a sartorial representation of what's happening to the Indian economy. I'm sure you've heard of Bharat and India. India actually today is two countries within one country. One is this. One is Bharat, and the other polished, suave, Western-looking, English-speaking is the India. So we have Bharat and India within one country. And this Bharat is so deprived of everything. This is the 55%, the farming community. They do not have anything. You don't have to go to Vidarbha to see farmers committing suicide or being in such distress. 700 meters from this hall, you will find the local Kuvapalli Farmers Cooperative every Monday. If you go there on a Monday morning at 8 a.m., you will find banana farmers bringing their crop. There's nobody to buy them for months, and they go on growing it, hoping that next season they get a better price. My friend Pramod, who cultivated tapioca last year, he's just harvested. He doesn't get a pie from some 8 months of work because tapioca sells for on wholesale for less than 10 rupees. And that's not a good return for 8 months of work. So we find everything loaded against this. Unfortunately, this 55% only contributes 15% to our economy, while industry and services contribute much more. So we actually need to break this bad news. It is painful. The Bible says, good friends hurt you by talking the truth to you. Bad friends shower you with kisses. Farmers are being showered with kisses. 40,000 farmers marched from Nasik to Mumbai, 180 kilometers last month. And the Mumbai Chief Minister, Devendra Fadnavis, told them, don't worry, I'll write off your loans, please go back. And all the poor farmers walked back. They'll farm again. Next year, they'll be in a crisis again. 300,000 farmers have committed suicide in India over 2 decades. And none of them has thought of changing their jobs. How shocking. How will this awareness reach them? Who's going to break this bad news to them? But true news to them. Who's going to tell it? I think this is an excellent platform to say that, even if many people cannot digest it. The farmers and the rural India is in such distress that I could not make, I'm a son of the soil of Kuvapalli, I could not make a presentation for this talk because for the last 48 hours, there was no power at home. Because there was a storm 2 days ago, and the rubber trees fell all over the place. So they broke the power lines, and I don't have, that is rural India. That, my dear friends, is the life of 715 million people who actually form 10% of the world's population. The biggest structural job change is going to happen through these people when they shift their jobs. They need to shift out. If you heard 300,000 IT professionals have committed suicide in the last 20 years, would anybody go to an engineering college to study that? Nobody would. Nobody would. But you hear that 300,000 farmers committed suicide and their children continue to do that, hoping that next year tapioca prices may improve, next year wheat prices, next year rice prices, and next year sugarcane prices may improve. They're going to decline long term. because technology keeps improving. We do not need 55% people there. Pope Francis called them the neglected people of the world, farmers. Donald Trump called them the forgotten people. Whatever you call them, what is the situation facing us is that we need to shift so many people out, and we need to actually wear agriculture like this. It should be an adornment for us. We need this much of our economy. It's 15%, not 55%. And if we have this, shift people out, a strong and healthy economy actually needs people to move out of sectors that do not contribute so much. If we have an efficient agricultural sector, we actually will be releasing millions of people to industry. In fact, for a healthy economy to survive, a strong agriculture, efficient agriculture sector is in fact a precondition. So we need to do that over the next 5, 10, as early as possible, or we're facing a calamity we've not seen before. And if you look back at what is the price that we paid to reach this situation, where we have excess of everything, that is even more painful. We have actually sunk bore wells everywhere. We have played havoc with our water tables. The European Commission estimates there are 20 million water tables that have been sunk in India, more than anywhere else in the world. And if we keep on doing that, and with all the pesticides that we've used in our farms, that means we've achieved all this surplus, yet it is not reaching the people. Because who are the consumers? The consumers are again the farmers. They have no latent demand. They do not have the money to buy this. There's a consumption only when the people can buy it. Only if farmers are able to move out, move up. And those of us who are sitting in this room, I would say some people need to move out of agriculture. The remaining people need to move up in their skills and technology. And policymakers and those who ideate, like all of us sitting here, we need to meditate on it. Move out, move up, and meditate. And I hope this country will pick up. We've got the determination always. Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, yes. Jai Kisan, but far more efficient, far fewer Kisans. I leave you with that thought. Thank you.